All right, hello and welcome to this Magnolia release 549 walkthrough. In this release, we provide fixes for 117 issues. Thank you again to the PD team for resolving the issues and building the release, and Topher and I are happy to show you what's new. We're going to start with component personalization. So component personalization is an addition to the personalization features list, and in the travel demo, we have 3 examples where we demonstrate component personalization. I'm going to start by opening the Pages app. On the travel homepage, we have this carousel that flips through a couple of tours. This used to be done with page variants, and now we've turned that into component variants to show that on the top spot on the homepage, there's an example of component personalization. You'll recognize personalized components from the variants icon. Here in the component toolbar is the variants icon, and also on every page that has any personalized content, you will see the icon as an indicator that there is personalized content on this page, either page variants or component variants. And the variants of a component are displayed here in a drop-down. So this particular component that shows a few tours has an original version of it and 3 geo-targeted versions, just like we had with page variants. The way you add component variants is there's a new action in the action bar, Add Component Variant, which creates a new variant and adds it to the list. The new variant is named variant and a number because it doesn't have an audience yet. So the next task is typically to choose an audience. You choose an audience using the same audience choose a light dialog that we used for pages, so no need to learn any new tricks. Editors can use the same dialog that they're already familiar with. Once you name an audience, the name is taken from here and used in the variant. So let's take an example, Americas. If I click Choose Audience, the audience name is chosen here, and I'm using the existing geo-targeted segments that we bootstrap with the travel demo. You can also use individual ad hoc traits, such as cookies, visitor, new visitor versus registered visitor, and so on. These are the 4 traits that we bootstrap and ship with the travel demo. In reality, although you probably get your traits from a CRM system or marketing automation system where you collect user characteristics. And let's preview the example so you can see it played through. I go back to the pages list, select the travel home, and preview it as a visitor. The anonymous user gets 3 tours from around the world, Swiss Alps, West Coast in the US, and an Asian tour. But when I select a persona such as Jaden Harris from the US, I get a choice of 3 different US tours, West Coast, Brazil, and diving in the Bahamas. So it works very much the same way page variants did, but now done with component variants. Let's take a look at another example. Page variants are still demonstrated in the demo, but we've moved them down here to the contact page. So when you expand this page, you see that this looks familiar. This is what page variants look like. They show up on the page tree. We moved it down here from the top spot because component variations and component personalization is likely a more used feature, so it should earn the top spot. If I edit the contacts page, you see variants here at the top, original plus the usual geo-targeted segments. The way this works in the demo is for an anonymous user whose origin we don't know, we just show 1 global phone number to reach us, whereas for geo-targeted segments, known users from a particular geo, we show phone numbers from Americas, phone numbers from Asia, and so on. The third example in the travel demo that shows component personalization is a little bit more advanced. It uses a behavior-based scenario where we capture the user's preference for a particular tour type. And this is a very common case, especially in the travel industry. When you go to a travel website and search for a tour, for example, a holiday in Orlando, the site remembers that, builds your preference around that, and the next time you return to the home page, they probably remind you with a picture of Disneyland or so on. So let's play here on the public instance how that scenario works. On the travel home, we have this question, which tour type are you? With 3 options, active, cultural, or off the beaten path. When I click one of these tour types, Magnolia stores my preference as a cookie. I browse through the site, I maybe look at a particular tour, and eventually when I return to the home page, the now redundant question about my tour type is gone, and instead we feature a couple of cultural tours since that is my preference. So that's the behavior-based preference example. And I'll show you how to build that. It's very simple. So let's start from a point where we don't have those component variants yet. I'm going to personalize this component that says which tour type are you. I'll create a variant for it and choose an audience naming the variant tour type is known. So I want to show this variant, which will be an empty one, to a visitor whose tour type we already know. The question is no longer relevant. I'll pick a cookie trait and set its value to tour type is any. And next, we have the original question, and when tour type is known, so I'll delete the content for those visitors whose tour type we know. Now we effectively have 2 variants of the component, the question and no question. So what do we show to visitors whose tour type we know? Let's feature them tours of their preferred type. I add another component, feature tours by tour type, after the first component. Again, I create a variant, choose an audience for it. Tour type is known. And I examine the cookie trait. If it has any value, I serve that variant. And now what I do with the original is a very cool feature. You can hide the original to show exclusive content. This is the case when you, for example, have a campaign and you want to target content to a particular audience only and show nothing to everybody else. For example, a campaign running on Facebook and you want to reward visitors coming from there with a cookie or something like that, or a coupon or a special prize. I'm going to hide the original. There we go. Now the example is built. Let's go back to the Pages app and preview the travel home as a visitor. Here we are. I'm going to clear my preference since we've played through this example before. As an anonymous user, I get this question, which tour type are you? Let's say I am an off-the-beaten-path traveler. I look at one of the off-the-beaten-path tours, and when I return to the home page, the irrelevant question is gone, and some off-the-beaten-path tours are featured for me. The reason we built component personalization is, after talking to many partners and clients who had already built it or were keenly waiting for it, the argument was, when you create page variants, you end up creating lots of redundant content. The page essentially gets copied down to the variants, and its page has often much more content than a single component. People want to do targeted little experiments, change something small and see how it impacts the site. So component variants are more surgical. You change less content, there's less to change overall. I want to share a few use cases of where this makes sense. For example, you might want to use personalization to attract, to greet a visitor who comes from a social media campaign. Even if you say, hello, Facebook user, it's already personalized. It's something more personal to the user. When you're at the stage where you're converting visitors, you might want to have a personalized call to action at the end of a blog post that is different for different type of users. For somebody who's a stranger, first-time visitor, you might want to offer a white paper for download, for example. But once they're a known user, serve a call to action that invites them to a webinar. When closing a deal, add the recipient's first name in an email, for example. It boosts the click-through rate. It's according to Forrester, improves click-through rates by 14% when you just name the user in the email. So much more personal. Upsell is a very common scenario. This is the case when you go buy a hamburger, they ask, would you like fries with that? It's a classic case of upsell, where you try to offer a more profitable item. So in the web context, you might, for example, try to serve the customer the next level of a subscription plan. For example, if they have phone subscription at the lowest level, don't sell that anymore. Show what's the next level up from there. Or just to delight, like we did in the travel demo, when returning to the home page after browsing the site. So show something new, not the stale content they've already seen. Component personalization is available in Enterprise Edition Pro only. In EE Standard, you can do page variants. In Pro, you can do page or component variants. In Standard, we don't cache the variants. In Pro, we do, with the Advanced Cache for Personalization module. And there's an intentional restriction, not because of licensing or anything like that, but just to keep things simple. We don't allow you to create page and component variants on the same page, because you end up with possibly very complex constructions where you end up creating lots of content, and it's hard to get a handle of, is this content being served to anybody? And finally, when you're downloading Magnolia 5.4.9, there are bundles available with and without component personalization. And you can identify them by this CP13N indicator in the file name. So choose a bundle of whether you're interested in this feature or not. In Magnolia 5.5, we will start by having all bundles including component personalization. So there you don't have the choice anymore. If you're building your own bundle, then your POM file must depend on this component personalization web app. And I encourage you to go and look at the 5.4.9 release notes where this is explained and you're provided the right targets to depend on. That's component personalization. Topher, you want to take over?
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so component personalization is the kind of headline feature, but there are many other nice improvements in 5.4.9. First, some improvements related to the developing or administrative experience. Close the tools. So in the security app, we've always been able to administer the users, the groups, and the roles. Now we have an extra sub-app, which is the tool sub-app. And this incorporates some of the features that used to be in the permissions tool app, and it's now right here in the security app, but in the new style. So it's a bit nicer to use, but has the same functionality. But there is some advanced functionality now. With Magnolia, you have a powerful permission system. You have users, groups, and roles. And groups can also contain other groups. And so administrators have sometimes been challenged to understand how all the permissions have, or which users or groups belong to a certain group. So just to demonstrate this, I've created a group which belongs to another group. So we have this editors with REST, and it belongs to an editors group, but it also has a REST role. So let's see how our new tools can help us understand that. So yeah, let's look at how would we find out all of the members of a certain group. Well, we have this tool now. So now if I look at the editors group, it shows me that there is a specific user which belongs to the editors group, but there's also this other group which belongs to that group. So then I can see even more. I can look at not just the direct members, but the members of the transitive groups. So now I can see that not only Edward, who's a direct child of editors, but also Waldo, who is the user in editors with REST, is a member of this group. So likewise with role assignments, I can enter in any role. So if I look at the REST role, I see that the super user has that role, but also the group editors with REST. So now it's much easier to understand how all of the roles and permissions are being applied in your system. Which, I mean, this is obviously a trivial example, but you can imagine some of our customers have hundreds of sites, and along with that, hundreds of groups. So that is a nice improvement. Now, this improvement also demonstrates actually a new API that we're providing with 5.4.9. It's a new API for creating this kind of, let's say, simple sub-app. So you're familiar with the content sub-apps with the detail in the browser. Now it's much easier to create this kind of what we call a tool sub-app. So we get, we get a new sub-app called a tool sub-app and tool sub-app descriptor. And basically what that is something that lets us have a number of tabs, and each of the tab can either have a form or something else, plus some actions out of the box. So you've seen this. This is one use case. Another use case, just as an example, would be something like the mail tools. Now this isn't using that API yet, but I just wanted to give an example of another simple tool app that's basically just a form and lets us check some things or change a very small bit of configuration. So this is where this is partly going is, we want to move away from doing things in the configuration app where you're very confused, there's no guidance, there's no validation, it's easy to make mistakes, and introduce more custom interfaces so that users and administrators know what they're doing and can be more productive. So out of the box, you get also like a form tool definition, which lets us make these forms easier, and a form tool presenter. So I can show you just a simple example of that. I used a YAML definition. So here's a very simple app, which I'll show you. You can see it's using the same regular base app, but when we get to the sub-apps, we're using this tools sub-app and tools sub-app descriptor. And inside that, we have a tools collection. And so I have one tool, the form tool 1, which is using this form tool definition and form tool presenter. And anybody who's familiar with doing dialogues will be right at home here. There's just a simple form. You can use all the fields and actions and just have a text field definition. So let's take a quick look at that. That's the sample tools. So that's how easy it is to create a simple form-based app. You'd still need to create your own action for that, but that would be a future improvement, is that we would have an action which would let you write directly to a specific node in the configuration. So this, you can see if we just have one tool, then there's no tabs. And oops. I'll just copy in the definition for another tool here, which is, again, just basically essentially a dialog definition. So now I have form tool 1 and form tool 2. And I'll go back to my sub-app. And now we can see we have that tool 1 and tool 2. And tool 2 is a more complicated form with access to other apps and other content. Yeah, so that's the new API for tool sub-apps. We also have some usability improvements. Very excited about this first one because this is something that developers often want to do. You want to see, it's great to be working in Magnolia, but sometimes you really just want to see a page with no Chrome around it, outside of the Magnolia context, see the query string, be able to view source and everything. So we have a new button here in the editor, which lets us open up the current page in a browser tab. So now, of course, it's easier to test the responsiveness of the page, see it full width, and browse it like I would normally browse it. see what the URL actually is, things that you often really need to get to when you're working on a real site. One caveat I want to mention about this feature is that it's based on the actual path within the Pages app, within the website workspace. So currently, if I go to a page, or actually, let's take a tour type. If I go to a page that's more of a dynamic page where we're using the selector, we're using the virtual URI mapping, and I use this feature, it's going to fall back to what's configured because it's just based on the path. But as long as you're working with a very straightforward page, this works perfectly. And we're working to improve the feature further to work with these more dynamic pages, which are using selectors or virtual URI mapping. Okay, another usability improvement is we had some requests from customers to disable drag and drop, particularly in the configuration app. With drag and drop, it's easy to make a mistake, to drag something somewhere, not sure which item you dragged it into. So we now have a configuration, very easy on any sub-app. Within the workbench, there's a drag and drop property. Default is true, but you can set it to false, and now I can't drag anything around anymore in that app. Okay, just to mention a few security fixes. So there was a vulnerability with the FCK editor, but now we've closed off anonymous access to its resources, so that's fixed. And also in the CAS module, we had a dependency to a library that where a vulnerability had been discovered, and that has been updated to the latest library. So those issues are resolved. And of course, there are many other smaller fixes, but that's what we wanted to share with you today about 549. So thanks a lot, and if you have questions, I'll be happy to field some.